Okay, so yeah, so just making sure. All right, so here we are. Welcome back. Phew, another catastrophe. Zoom didn't work, but I have Google Meets kind of works. It's only good for an hour, so then I guess today would be a short lesson because by the time I get it all back up, it'll be a joke. Anyhow, technology and me are like doing zero. Alrighty, so last time we were here, we were talking about the brain and learning all about the brain. And the part that I didn't get to show you that I wanted to show you was this link here that comes up. Has tons and tons and tons of information, and it breaks everything all down. And so if you're ever kind of wondering, oh, well, what does the hippocampus do? Well, you have somewhere here now where it gives you all of the information and what it does. I stole their picture, as you can see. And then the anatomy, like everything, it breaks it totally down. It's probably the best site I found for any time that you want to learn a little bit more. And so then, the cortex, all of the stuff, hippocampal physiology, like all of the stuff we were talking about, but broken down in a bit more detail than what we covered. Well, quite a bit more detail. But nonetheless, it's all here, and it breaks it all down, shows you everything you could probably want to know, and then it goes on to cover every part of everything that we have talked about in regards to the hippocampus and all of that. It's worth the scroll through and the read. And so I wanted you to kind of remember way back when we were doing the first session, and we were learning about the brain and all the different frequencies and how everything kind of all meshes together and how different things get, we understand them because of the signals that are sent to our brain. But so much of the time there can be factors that are limiting or changing that. And that's why each one of us potentially can perceive the exact same thing, but in a different way, and it affects us differently. And so that's kind of the magic between this brain, because even though we all have the same things, our sensory perception is different. And so another little thing that makes it unique for all of us. And so I wanted you just to kind of remember that, because that's really, really important. And so the limbic system is really, really, really important. And it's, the big part of what we're going to talk about today a little bit more than we did yesterday, because the limbic system is responsible, because the amygdala, this little guy right down here, it regulates emotion, encodes memories, and especially for like emotional remembering things. And so that's why sometimes if something were to happen and it created an impact, somebody did a surprise birthday party and it totally shocked you and you'd never had one before, well, you'll probably always remember the date and the time and everything when that all happened. Well, that's all thanks to the amygdala. And so the same happens on the negative side of that. So something negative, that's why it hangs on to it, because part of its role in that primitive function is to keep us safe. And so it needs to always remember and hang on to all of these things, because the one thing it wants to make sure of is this never, ever, ever happens again if it's something bad. And if it's something good, it's like to remember that feeling of the joy and the specialness that it created, because that's what you want to have more of in your life. And it does all of this. We don't have any say. Like, it's just working behind the scenes constantly. And so that's kind of why it's the big ticket item that we're spending so much time on. And so they've come up with all sorts of things that can stimulate this and help change a lot of things. And yeah, so you can do more research on this. It's a pretty amazing little tiny part of our brain, and even though it's tiny, the function and what it brings to us is huge. And so how does this all work? Well, our eyes and our ears send a message to the amygdala, which is, and it does all of the automated responses associated with fear. So anything to do with that, our hormonal secretions, processing and consolidation of memory. And so big ticket item, that guy, and we are moving right along here. 2. Okay. It decreases the blood flow to your brain's frontal lobe. So when the amygdala is in charge, there is no ability for you to have conscious, reactive thought, because it's shutting off the blood flow to that frontal lobe. So all executive function is in the toilet and somebody just flushed it. It's whoosh, gone. And that's why it is impossible to try changing somebody's mind or their viewpoint or make them feel better or any of those things when the amygdala is locked on. Because in order for us to change something, we need to release the amygdala's response so that we can get back to using our frontal lobe and all of the executive function. That's also why when it's in charge, we do stupid things. Because we really are not in control. This little mechanism is running the show. And so, absolutely. The same thing could happen. Let's just say somebody is cooking in the kitchen and somebody else comes into the kitchen and goes to light the burner. But when they go to light the burner, they fiddle around first with the gas on before they light it. Well, now, in the event the person standing there cooking has had an experience where that has created an explosion, that seeing that activity will bring back that memory full force to the amygdala. So that person might be liable to lash out verbally or physically or do all sorts of crazy things that are in no way related to the actual event of somebody else trying to light that burner. So when we are faced with somebody having a reaction that is way above and beyond what it is we are seeing, we have to take a step back and understand that they may not be consciously aware of their response. And so us trying to reason or rationalize or discuss when something is locked in to that place is a waste of breath. And in essence, in some cases, we can continue to put ourselves in harm's way because we are waiting for a reaction that is from the rational side of the fence. And so if we put this into horses, so we think, because we've been taught that jiggling the lead rope is the way to gather the horse's attention and focus on us. But let's say the horse associates that jiggling with a previous experience that was not good. So we don't recognize that the horse is locked in to the amygdala taking control. And it's not like horses have big brains to start with where there's a whole lot of frontal lobe activity going on, but nonetheless. So they're locked into something, and we continue to jiggle that lead rope, trying to get what it is we're after without recognizing where we've put that horse. And then all of a sudden, the horse rears back or strikes or charges us forward, and we're dumbfounded. We have no idea what just transpired. Well, we missed what we did, and we weren't aware what happens when the amygdala is locked on, because if the horse had been able to use the responsive side of its brain, it probably would not have ran over you or did something. It would have recognized it as a cue, but that's not where it went. And so a little kind of piece of material that's shoved in the middle of nowhere in our brain, but it is so powerful, and it is the man in charge. And we need to really understand that, because if we want to work with it, we have to work within the parameters in which it exists. And so part of it, once it's running the show, it sends stress, and it senses stress or danger, it sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. Because now the hypothalamus acts like a switchboard, and it communicates with the rest of the body through the anatomic nervous system. So, and that's referred to as the ANS. And so it's responsible, the ANS is responsible for 3 main nervous systems within the body, as well as controlling all of the involuntary body functions, such as breathing, blood pressure, heart rate, dilation or constriction of blood vessels and airways in the lungs. So pretty big switchboard here. So you're starting to get an idea how so many of our responses, or an animal's responses, are totally involuntary. And we all know what it feels like when we can't get enough air. And so things start going awry in the switchboard, and it puts a lot of pressure on our diaphragm. We have a lot of trouble getting our air. And so does an animal, so does any living thing. And so we have to remember how all of these things are interconnected. And as we move along through what we're going to be learning about, we're going to learn how to disengage and correct them. But first we need to understand how it all works and how powerful this whole system really, really is. And before I got my PTSD, I had no appreciation at all for any of this stuff and what it brought to my life. And yeah, pretty bloody amazing is all I can say. So the anatonic systems, the three that we're going to talk about are the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, and the enteric. And, you know, if you remember back when we looked, the hypothalamus is not that very big of an organ, but it certainly has a huge job to do. And so the hypothalamus can be injured in many different ways as well. It can be injured through an impact. It could be injured because, you know, for whatever reason you have lack of oxygen in your brain, the circulation isn't great enough. So then you start losing neural networks and neural pathways. It can be injured because the other components that it's communicating with start decaying or declining, and so then it's not getting the proper information. And, you know, that's why hydration is so important, and the stuff that we're going to learn about as we move forward. But you have to remember, these are really small little organs that do major, major, major jobs. And everything that I talk about here, Ninja Nerd on YouTube has awesome, awesome videos. And so the sympathetic system here, let's see if it works on here. Can you see this video? All right. So I'm stopping here. And you can hear the sound? Okay, so let's see if there is sound here. Off, close, settings. Okay, this is on. All right, let's see what happens. There, can you hear that? All right, so you didn't hear the sympathetic nervous system. That's just me. Okay, so, you know, this is why I hate. Okay, so, like, give control. What am I doing? Okay, I don't know. What am I doing? This is, what's this? Include computer sound. Stop sharing computer. Well, I don't want to stop sharing computer sound. That's what I bloody well need. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so audio settings. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to use this pissant thing. It's gonna make me swear here. Really, like, okay, so, stop sharing. Now I want to share, so let's try to make this all gonna include computer sound. So if you could hear it off my computer, you should be able to hear it, right? So I'll crank this puppy to blow my speakers. Let's see if that helps. Okay. Okay, so then how do I don't know. Can you share both here? I don't know. Okay, so here I'm going to share. All right, so one. All right, Now, can you hear this? All right, so stop. Okay. Now, can you see this screen again? Okay, phew. Okay, and so I bet you guys had no idea how much our system is interconnected and how much information is coming from everywhere. And yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I found all of that really, really interesting when I was trying to, like I said, figure out how to get rid of PTSD. And so the sympathetic nervous system, most people talk about it because it is part of the fight and flight. And the parasympathetic that we'll move on to after this is rest and digest. But so the parasympathetic is kind of like the gas to the pedal. And the idea behind it is so that it gives you the burst of adrenaline necessaries and the access to glucose so that you can do whatever it is you need to do to remove yourself from the state of danger. And while that all worked all fine and dandy when we were cavemen, it doesn't work so hot in this day and age because the dangers and the stresses that we come upon in this day and age are continual, and the onslaught is just shooting down the pipe 24/7. And so, and from my opinion and what I've learned, I'm of the tendency to now believe that's why we have so much depression and we have so much anxiety and inability to control emotional response. I think they are all totally related to a sympathetic system gone awry. And yeah, it's a pretty big ticket item. And so the HPA axis is where the hypothalamus, which is, our switchboard, the pituitary, and the adrenal they are all need to be engaged so that we can stay in a sustained state of flight or fight. And so that's why now you hear so much about adrenal fatigue. Because if you think about our lifestyles, that means we are engaging our adrenals 24/7. Well, eventually they exhaust. And then when we do, we have, emotional breakdowns. We have horrendous brain fog. We have disinterest. We, a host of other things, because you just can't keep putting gas on a fire indefinitely. Eventually something burns out. And yeah, pretty big ticket item. And way back in the beginning in my healing journey, I had what they labeled as adrenal fatigue. And I never understood it because we're treating the adrenals. And now with what I know, what a joke. You're treating the last guy on the chain. We're supposed to be treating, we want to get rid of this, we got to treat at the top of the chain and stop the flow downwards. But nonetheless, that's the learning curve and how I kind of learned. And so once the adrenal glands are activated, they pump epinephrine, which is like adrenaline, into the bloodstream. Epinephrine increases heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen intake via breathing, rate increase, and increasing the electricity for expansion of airways. So more oxygen is sent to the brain. Then the epinephrine triggers the release of blood sugar and fats into the bloodstream. And that's why when you have exhausted adrenals, you can't lose weight. So this means the whole body is now capable of increased sight, hearing, and smell, and has the oxygen and blood required for action and fuel to feed whatever activity. Now, these events happen so quickly inside a person's body that it's normal for that person to be totally unaware of these changes. And so that's why when in session 1, we were starting to really start spending a lot of time about being mindful and checking in and seeing what's going on inside my body. What am I feeling? Where is that coming from? Why is it there? So that the more mindful we can become, the sooner we're going to catch some of these really subtle things in their infancy. And when they're in their infancy, we then have a way that we can start changing and stop that kaleidoscope, like the dominoes going all the way to the end. And so right now, we're just getting all of the information. As we start moving forward, we'll start working on the strategies and everything. But like I said earlier, I ought to make sure you understand how complex this system is, that we're going to try to navigate so we can prevent it from running the show. And so once the initial surge of epinephrine subsides, the hypothalamus activates the hypothalamus. So now it's communicating back and forth. And that's why when one of the tests for your adrenals, they want to send you for a morning and an afternoon cortisol test, because they're trying to determine when your cortisol is elevated. So there's a really good chance when everything's gone awry, your morning cortisol will be higher than your afternoon cortisol. And it should be quite a bit lower. And so that's why they start doing some of these tests, so they can start trying to sift out what the impact is on your adrenals. Okay, and so to continue on, once the epinephrine subsides and the hypothalamus gets involved, then it activates the second component of the stress response system, the HPA axis. And so now hormones are sent to the pituitary. And so that sends hormones to the adrenals, prompting the adrenals to release cortisol. And cortisol allows the body to stay on high alert and ready for action. So this is a three-step process here. So we started off with one, now we get the pituitary involved, and it's getting stuff, making the adrenals do cortisol. And so now when the cortisol levels begin to fall, the body is supposed to step in and bring the body back to a resting state. But because the vagus nerve is so heavily involved in all of this, often that does not happen. And so when that happens, things start to go awry in our body, and our body continues to send distress signals back to the brain, and our brain is now totally engaged, making the fear response both physiological as well as psychological. And with the malfunction of the vagus nerve and not being able to retain a resting state, that's where we start heading into anxiety, PTSD, depression, panic attacks, all of those kind of things, as well as the other things that come apart because we're having breakdowns inside our body because we're not meant to stay in that state. The sympathetic state is meant to be a momentary thing, not an everyday life way of being. And unfortunately, the environment that we live in for the most part now has really put a tax on the sympathetic system within all of us. So the enteric system, we're going to talk just a little bit about that, and let's see if we can get this baby to work. Now, can you hear that? Yep. All right, so we're going full screen. All right, we're playing. Okay. Okay, so now that short little video just kind of gave you snip pip look into our digestive system. And really important to know that everything that happens in there, if any part of our body is in a sympathetic, locked in response, we are going to have poor digestion. We're going to have gas, bloating, diarrhea. We're going to have a whole host of things going on. And part of that is because of the diaphragm and how that's affected. And as we go through, we're going to kind of learn all of this, how it all ties in and how important it is to everything. But I really want you to understand that if you have a hangnail, we can't look at it just like a hangnail. That hangnail is a symptom of many other things that go up the chain. And if we want to fix the hangnail, we have to move up to the chain and correct the very first thing that started to go wrong, that worked its way all the way down through all of those domino blocks to get to our hangnail. And and so that's why you really kind of have to get a handle on all of these different systems, because everything about each one of us is unique, and how we interact in the world is unique, and how all of these things are have contributing factors are unique within all of us. I mean, some of it's very similar, but we need to start really paying attention and really being mindful. So honing those skills again to really feel what's going on inside of our body, and looking at it not like the stomach ache, but thinking all of those steps ahead of that. So where is the start of this? Like, what's really causing the stomach ache? Okay. And so there's a big connection between the vagus nerve and the ENS. And, aging and cell loss of the enteric nervous system, those can be indicated because of constipation, incontinence, evacuation disorders, or a loss of immunity. And of course, that cell loss can also be contributed to, sustained stress, like pedal to the metal. And so big ticket items, we need to look after a lot of different things to ensure we keep that healthy. Because if we don't have a healthy ENS, we certainly can't begin to absorb or get the nutrients that we require for health. So again, it's a really big part of the big picture that is never ever talked about. I guess we're just born and we're just supposed to magically know all this stuff. But I certainly didn't, and it was a pretty big learning curve for me, learning about this. So now this short little video will go over the parasympathetic, and then we're going to talk about that for a bit. Oops, press the wrong button. Okay, full screen. Okay, I'm escaping. Okay, so in that brief little clips, we get an idea why our face can show so much stress. Because with all of the relaxation being sent there by the parasympathetic, when it's not working, we have a stressed face. And when we were learning how to read the horse's face, and I was talking to you about how you can see how tight it is, well, now you understand why that happens. Because one part of our system is locked on and the other part has either gotten tired and quit working, or stuff's gone awry and it's not able to provide the relaxation. That's why your jaw gets tight. That's why you have trouble with your vision. You have trouble focusing. That's why your throat is hoarse, or it gets a funny little tickle in it. Yeah, quite a host of stuff. Pretty amazing. And that's why a facial massage feels so good and is so relaxing. And yeah, big ticket item. And then as you see, the vagus nerve, it feeds almost every single organ in our body. And so we're going to learn a lot about the vagus nerve as we move along, because being able to improve tone to your vagal tone is going to be one of the greatest assets that you master as we move through this, in regards to having health and peace of mind and relaxation and a healthy body, a healthy response. And so in the short little clip, so parasympathetic, they're supposed to relax us when everything's working good. Rest and digest. It's responsible for sexual arousal, salivation, tears, urination, and defecation. And so there's really a thing about don't get your shit in a knot. Because if you're uptight about anything, your parasympathetic is not got you in the rest and digest state. So that's why you become constipated, among other things, lack of water or whatever. But you got to remember, there's a whole whack of invisible things always at play. And so in the little clip, it also showed you that the parasympathetic system makes up, the oculomotor, the facial and glysopharyngeal, and the vagus nerves. Those are the ones. And that's what we're going to be kind of looking at. And yeah. Okay. So the ocular motor nerve is the third cranial nerve, CN3. It allows movement of the eye muscles, constriction of the pupil, focusing the eyes, and the position of the upper eyelid. Facial, so you get salivation, tears, returns hearing to normal state, taste sensation from 2/3 front of the tongue, and the glossopharyngeal is the 9th of the 12 cranial nerves. And these connect to organs, muscles, and other structures in your mouth and throat. These nerves are paired. There's one on each side, and they end deep inside your neck near the back of your throat. It enables swallowing, and it's also one of the few nerves with 3 types of fibers. So it has both. It's got motor for muscle movement, parasympathetic for helping tissues and organs rest when not in use, and it's got sensory, provides sensations so you can detect taste, touch, and temperature. And because of all of this muscular control, the glossopharyngeal nerve can affect your carotid and sinus. So it has a role in your blood pressure. It has control over your middle ear. So It helps you feel things, detect fullness, and that's why you feel pain from an ear infection. And it also, because of the parotoid gland that it controls, it decreases saliva production when you finish eating, or it gives you that dry mouth when you're afraid or whatever. And so, speaking of the dry mouth thing, so a lot of medications that you take give you dry mouth. And so you have to think about, yeah, the medication gave me that, but what does my dry mouth, what is it signaling to my brain? And so, as we start working our way backwards and you start realizing, okay, well, I would have a dry mouth in a stress response. So the medication gave me the dry mouth, but what it's signaling to my body isn't that the medication gave me this. It's signaling to your body that something's wrong here. There's a stress response. And so I really want you to be able to start thinking about and working your way backwards to the impact all of these different things have on our bodies. And in our current pharmaceutical world, they're really quick to dole out all sorts of things with all sorts of side effects. And while it may fix the thing that you want to have fixed, a lot of the side effects are creating a secondary response. And so, of course, it also gives you taste in your tongue. And the streptopharyngeal, it's a long muscle that runs down the part of your throat, CN9, and it connects so that you lift the voice box in the throat. It makes it possible to swallow and make sounds. Your tonsils, of course, are there to protect you. And then we have our vagus nerve. So it's the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system. And we're going to learn a shitload about it coming up here. But it controls so many body function, and it's responsible for your mood, your immune health, digestion, your heart rate. The list of that just keeps going on and on and on with what it does. So now in your workbook, you will have your notes for lesson 2. And then at the end of that are your questions. What you've been emailing me, your homework. So what are your takeaways from today's session? What did you learn about yourself today? What can you apply moving forward based on what you learned today? What are your physiological responses to your fears, doubts, self-doubts, and traumas? Because now I want you to start thinking about, oh, well, that just frightened me a little bit. So let's get out of our head and let's start feeling and start working our way backwards and trying to identify all of the different responses that were going on in our body. And so by the time we finished the third part of this program, you guys are going to be really honed at being able to be inside your body and looking around and honing that mindfulness awareness skill that we started to learn in part 1. And so very, very, very important. And so that's your homework. But we're going to go on here till Google or whatever this program is kicks me off, because they'll only let me do this for so long. So when they cut me off, we're done. So if I don't get a chance to say goodbye, well, oh well. Shit happens. What can I say? So, yeah. And so moving forward, lesson 3. Now we're going to get into the vagus nerve, and we're going to really start learning about this amazing system. And I want to remind everybody that what we're learning about for us is pretty much identical for every other animal, like the horse or the dog or the cat. So we're not just learning about this just for our benefit. Everything that we learn and we learn about how to make this better for us, we can apply those same things anywhere else that we want to make it better for, just by the understanding and getting a handle. And the better we get at getting inside of ourselves, so when we try little things, we know how well that works, well, then we can start applying that otherwise. And so, when I said how nice a face massage feels, so when your dog is stressed, if you gather the dog's face in your hands so your thumbs are up, and you use your thumbs to stroke on both sides of the muzzle, and then bring them up and stroke in behind, like the eyes, like in front of the eyes, and use your fingers to massage the back of the ears, that will bring most dogs immediately out of a place of high anxiety down. And you're going to start to understand why as we start moving through and we start learning more about these systems. But it's really important to play, to be curious, and to start investigating, because exploration is going to be your greatest asset through this entire journey. Okay. And the more we don't want to do something means the longer whatever it is going to stick there, because resistance equals persistence. And really hard thing for us to wrap our head around, that when we surrender to a feeling that we don't like, that is the key for removing it. Not pretending it's not there, not the stiff upper lip, not the go get busy and find some other thing to do. And I can honestly say in my journey, that was the toughest part, was the surrendering, because I have a tendency to pretend it's not there because I don't want to go there. And to fully understand why we might be feeling something, we have to be open enough to receive some of its energy. And that's how we get our lessons. And so, yeah, I'm not going to say this is going to be easy if this is a journey that you're going to go down, but I can tell you that the more you surrender, the easier everything's going to get. And that, I can tell you with my profound experience, is going to be something magical, and you're never going to look back, and you're just going to wonder, what the hell took me so long? So we're going to just pop over here to do the vagus nerve, and then we're going to start talking about it. Okay.